I never thought I'd end up telling this story. Not because I can't, but because every time I replay it in my head, that same cold knot tightens in my gut, the one I felt the night it all began. Let me start from the beginning, so you understand how it unfolded. I grew up in Bridgewater, Ohio, a quiet, middle-of-nowhere town just far enough from Cleveland that people like to pretend bad things didn't happen here. My best friend since middle school was Eric Palmer. He lived 2 blocks over, and from the time we were 12, we were practically glued at the hip. Football on weekends, fishing trips with his dad, late-night video games in his basement that stretched until dawn. Eric's dad, Tom Palmer, was complicated. He worked construction, broad shoulders, rough hands, a permanent smell of sawdust and beer. The kind of man everyone in town respected. He coached Little League, lent tools to neighbors, even helped rebuild old porches for free. To the outside world, he was Mr. Palmer, the kind of guy you thanked in church bulletins. But behind closed doors, there was a different Tom. You ever meet someone whose whole mood can change in the blink of an eye? 1 minute they're laughing with you, and the next their stare could strip paint off a wall. That was him. I never saw him hit Eric, but I didn't need to. I could feel the tension in that house. The way Eric flinched at small noises, the way he'd always say, "Let's just hang at your place tonight." By the time we were juniors in high school, Eric's mom was long gone. Rumor was she couldn't take Tom's temper anymore. She left in the middle of the night and didn't take Eric with her. Tom made sure Eric never forgot that. It was a cold night in November 2021. Eric invited me over after football practice. We were in his room, half watching some low-budget horror flick, when a crash echoed from downstairs. Then came a man's voice, sharp, booming like a gunshot. "Eric!
Get down here!"
Eric froze. His eyes darted toward me, then down at the floor. "Just stay here," he whispered. But of course I didn't. I crept halfway down the stairs. From where I stood, I could see Tom in the kitchen, red-faced, clutching a shattered plate in one hand. "You think money grows on trees?" He barked. "I didn't touch it, Dad," Eric stammered. Tom's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump in his cheek. "Don't lie to me." The air in that kitchen felt dense, almost syrupy. Then Tom's eyes flicked up and found me. And just like that, his whole face changed. "Well, look who it is," he said smoothly, voice calm, almost friendly. "Our star wide receiver. You hungry, kid? Got leftover pizza in the fridge." The whiplash was dizzying. Fury 1 second, charm the next. My stomach churned. I knew what I'd just seen, and I knew I wasn't supposed to see it. The first accident happened 2 months later. Tom's father, Eric's grandpa, lived in a small room at the back of the house. Old man Weakheart barely walked anymore. One morning, Eric told me his grandpa had fallen down the basement stairs. Dead on impact. I went over that night. Eric was sitting on the porch steps, hoodie pulled over his head, eyes red. "He never went down those stairs," he muttered. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting beside him. He stared at the ground. Grandpa couldn't even handle the front steps. "He never went down there." Before I could say anything, the front door creaked open. Tom stepped out, beer in hand, that easy smile plastered on his face. "You boys need anything?" His tone was casual, but his eyes, God, his eyes had that flicker again. The same one I saw that night in the kitchen. The second accident came weeks later. Eric's older sister, Jenny, was home from college for winter break. She was sharp, headstrong, the only one who ever challenged Tom. She didn't take his crap. One night the fire alarm went off. Smoke poured from her bedroom. They said she'd fallen asleep with a candle burning. But when the firefighters went through the wreckage, they found the smoke detector had been disabled. Not just dead batteries, missing ones. At the funeral, Eric pulled me aside. His hands were shaking. "Dad knew," he whispered. He knew Jenny always lit candles before bed. He told her 100 times it was a fire hazard. His voice cracked. "But why the batteries, man? Why take them out?" I didn't have an answer. By spring, Tom's younger brother, Eric's uncle, had moved in. Lost his job, needed a place to crash. Within a month, he was dead too. Crushed in the garage when a heavy shelf collapsed on him. The police called it a freak accident. But later, Eric told me quietly, eyes hollow, that shelf was bolted to the wall. I helped him put it up. It doesn't just fall. That's what Eric said, voice shaking. And that's when I started to believe what I'd already feared. These weren't accidents. And Tom Tom was the common thread tying them all together. One night in April 2022, I was over helping Eric with homework. The house was unusually quiet. Even the hum of the old refrigerator sounded distant. Then the front door opened hard enough to rattle the frame. Tom stepped in, boots caked with mud, face drawn tight like stretched leather. He didn't say a word, just trudged past us and into the kitchen. We heard the fridge door slam, the hiss of a bottle cap twisting off. Then his voice, low, gruff. "Eric, come here." Eric froze mid-sentence. His pencil rolled off the table and hit the floor. He swallowed hard and stood up. "Just stay here," he muttered. My pulse kicked up. I waited a few seconds before following quietly down the hall. Tom was standing by the counter, one hand gripping a six-pack, one bottle already half empty. "You think you're smarter than me?" His tone was almost conversational, but there was that dangerous edge underneath. Eric blinked, caught off guard. "What? No, Dad, Tom leaned closer, his breath heavy with beer. "I seen the way you look at me. Like you're figuring me out. Like you're keeping score." Eric's lip trembled. "I'm not," he said softly. The sound of glass shattering cut through the air as Tom slammed the bottle on the counter. Beer splattered across the floor. He grabbed Eric by the collar and yanked him close, the veins in his forearm standing out. "You keep your mouth shut about family business, you hear me?" That's when he noticed me standing in the doorway. His grip loosened instantly. He turned, that same too-perfect smile sliding back into place. "Hey," he said cheerfully, "you want a soda, kid?" My stomach dropped. That mask again. Polite. Polished. But behind his eyes, something cold and furious watched. The final straw came in June. Eric called me late one night, whispering so softly I could barely hear him. "I found something," he said. "You need to see this." I biked over through the thick summer air, heart pounding the whole way. He met me at the garage door, pale and jittery. "Keep it down," he said, glancing toward the house. He led me inside and moved a stack of old toolboxes aside. Behind them was a dusty notebook, black cover worn smooth. "Dad's," he said. Inside, the pages were filled with neat handwriting, Tom's handwriting. Diagrams, sketches, wiring layouts, notes on stair angles, shelf weights, electrical circuits. Each page was labeled with a name: Grandpa, Jenny, Uncle Rick. And then the last one, Eric. Under his name, routine, showers, 6:30 a.m., bikes to school, 7:15, bathroom fan faulty. Possible shock hazard. My blood ran cold. "We need to go to the cops," I whispered. Eric shook his head. "You don't get it. They won't believe us. Everyone loves him. He's got this whole town wrapped around his damn finger." A week later, everything exploded. I was asleep when my phone buzzed. 2:13 a.m., Eric's name flashing. I answered groggy. "Help," he whispered. "He's coming for me." I shot upright. "Where are you?" "In the basement," his voice cracked. He locked me in. Said he's fixing the breaker, but I know the line's cut. I didn't think. I just ran. By the time I reached his house, the lights were on, flickering faintly. I could hear the hum of something mechanical from the garage. I crept around back, heart hammering in my ears. Through the small basement window, I saw Eric pounding on the inside of a wooden door, his face white with terror. And then Tom appeared behind him. Calm, tool in hand. "Time to learn some respect, son." I didn't wait. I grabbed the nearest rock and smashed the window, screaming Eric's name. Glass shattered, spraying my face. Tom spun toward me, his expression contorting. Finally, the mask gone. No charm, no calm. Just raw, unfiltered rage. "Get out," he hissed. Eric stumbled backward. I reached through the broken frame, yanking him toward me. The jagged glass tore into my arms, but I didn't care. He crawled through gasping, and we ran, barefoot, bleeding. Wild with adrenaline. Neighbors heard the commotion and called 911. When the cops arrived, Tom was standing in the driveway, beer in hand, cool as ever. "Boys were just horsing around," he said, smiling. Got a little carried away. But Eric had the notebook. He handed it to the officers, his hand shaking. "This is what he's been doing," he said. I never thought I'd end up telling this story. Not because I can't, but because every time I replay it in my head, that same cold knot tightens in my gut, the one I felt the night it all began. Let me start from the beginning so you understand how it unfolded. I grew up in Bridgewater, Ohio, a quiet, middle-of-nowhere town just far enough from Cleveland that people like to pretend bad things didn't happen here. My best friend since middle school was Eric Palmer. He lived 2 blocks over, and from the time we were 12, we were practically glued at the hip. Football on weekends, fishing trips with his dad, late-night video games in his basement that stretched until dawn. Eric's dad, Tom Palmer, was complicated. He worked construction. Broad shoulders, rough hands, a permanent smell of sawdust and beer. The kind of man everyone in town respected. He coached Little League, lent tools to neighbors, even helped rebuild old porches for free. To the outside world, he was Mr. Palmer, the kind of guy you thanked in church bulletins. But behind closed doors, there was a different Tom. You ever meet someone whose whole mood can change in the blink of an eye? One minute they're laughing with you, and the next their stare could strip paint off a wall. That was him. I never saw him hit Eric, but I didn't need to. I could feel the tension in that house, the way Eric flinched at small noises, the way he'd always say, "Let's just hang at your place tonight." By the time we were juniors in high school, Eric's mom was long gone. Rumor was she couldn't take Tom's temper anymore. She left in the middle of the night and didn't take Eric with her. Tom made sure Eric never forgot that. It was a cold night in November 2021. Eric invited me over after football practice. We were in his room, half watching some low-budget horror flick, when a crash echoed from downstairs. Then came a man's voice, sharp, booming like a gunshot. "Eric, get down here." Eric froze. His eyes darted toward me, then down at the floor. "Just stay here," he whispered. But of course I didn't. I crept halfway down the stairs. From where I stood, I could see Tom in the kitchen, red-faced, clutching a shattered plate in one hand. "You think money grows on trees?" he barked. "I didn't touch it, Dad," Eric stammered. Tom's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump in his cheek. "Don't lie to me." The air in that kitchen felt dense, almost syrupy. Then Tom's eyes flicked up and found me, and just like that, his whole face changed. "Well, look who it is," he said smoothly, voice calm, almost friendly. "Our star wide receiver. You hungry, kid? Got leftover pizza in the fridge." The whiplash was dizzying. Fury 1 second, charm the next. My stomach churned. I knew what I'd just seen, and I knew I wasn't supposed to see it. The first accident happened 2 months later. Tom's father, Eric's grandpa, lived in a small room at the back of the house. Old man, weak heart, barely walked anymore. One morning, Eric told me his grandpa had fallen down the basement stairs, dead on impact. I went over that night. Eric was sitting on the porch steps, hoodie pulled over his head, eyes red. "He never went down those stairs," he muttered. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting beside him. He stared at the ground. Grandpa couldn't even handle the front steps. He never went down there. Before I could say anything, the front door creaked open. Tom stepped out, beer in hand, that easy smile plastered on his face. "You boys need anything?" His tone was casual, but his eyes, God, his eyes, had that flicker again. The same one I saw that night in the kitchen. The second accident came weeks later. Eric's older sister, Jenny, was home from college for winter break. She was sharp, headstrong, the only one who ever challenged Tom. She didn't take his crap. One night, the fire alarm went off. Smoke poured from her bedroom. They said she'd fallen asleep with a candle burning. But when the firefighters went through the wreckage, they found the smoke detector had been disabled. Not just dead batteries, missing ones. At the funeral, Eric pulled me aside. His hands were shaking. "Dad knew," he whispered. He knew Jenny always lit candles before bed. He told her 100 times it was a fire hazard. His voice cracked. "But why the batteries, man? Why take them out?" I didn't have an answer. By spring, Tom's younger brother, Eric's uncle, had moved in, lost his job, needed a place to crash. Within a month, he was dead too, crushed in the garage when a heavy shelf collapsed on him. The police called it a freak accident. But later, Eric told me quietly, eyes hollow, that shelf was bolted to the wall. I helped him put it up. It doesn't just fall. That's what Eric said, voice shaking. And that's when I started to believe what I'd already feared. These weren't accidents. And Tom was the common thread tying them all together. One night in April 2022, I was over helping Eric with homework. The house was unusually quiet. Even the hum of the old refrigerator sounded distant. Then the front door opened hard enough to rattle the frame. Tom stepped in, boots caked with mud, face drawn tight like stretched leather. He didn't say a word, just trudged past us and into the kitchen. We heard the fridge door slam, the hiss of a bottle cap twisting off. Then his voice, low, gruff. "Eric, come here." Eric froze mid-sentence. His pencil rolled off the table and hit the floor. He swallowed hard and stood up. "Just stay here," he muttered. My pulse kicked up. I waited a few seconds before following quietly down the hall. Tom was standing by the counter, one hand gripping a six-pack, one bottle already half empty. "You think you're smarter than me?" His tone was almost conversational, but there was that dangerous edge underneath. Eric blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "No, Dad, Tom leaned closer, his breath heavy with beer. "I seen the way you look at me, like you're figuring me out, like you're keeping score." Eric's lip trembled. "I'm not," he said softly. The sound of glass shattering cut through the air as Tom slammed the bottle on the counter. Beer splattered across the floor. He grabbed Eric by the collar and yanked him close, the veins in his forearm standing out. "You keep your mouth shut about family business, you hear me?" That's when he noticed me standing in the doorway. His grip loosened instantly. He turned, that same too-perfect smile sliding back into place. "Hey," he said cheerfully, "you want a soda, kid?" My stomach dropped. That mask again. Polite, polished. But behind his eyes, something cold and furious watched. The final straw came in June. Eric called me late one night, whispering so softly I could barely hear him. "I found something," he said. "You need to see this." I biked over through the thick summer air, heart pounding the whole way. He met me at the garage door, pale and jittery. "Keep it down," he said, glancing toward the house. He led me inside and moved a stack of old toolboxes aside. Behind them was a dusty notebook, black cover worn smooth. "Dad's," he said. Inside, the pages were filled with neat handwriting, Tom's handwriting. Diagrams, sketches, wiring layouts, notes on stair angles, shelf weights, electrical circuits. Each page was labeled with a name: Grandpa, Jenny, Uncle Rick. And then the last one, Eric. Under his name, routine, shower 6:30 a.m., bikes to school 7:15, bathroom fan faulty, possible shock hazard. My blood ran cold. "We need to go to the cops," I whispered. Eric shook his head. "You don't get it. They won't believe us. Everyone loves him. He's got this whole town wrapped around his damn finger." A week later, everything exploded. I was asleep when my phone buzzed. 2:13 a.m. Eric's name flashing. I answered groggy. "Help," he whispered. "He's coming for me." I shot upright. "Where are you?" "In the basement," his voice cracked. "He locked me in. Said he's fixing the breaker, but I know the line's cut." I didn't think. I just ran. By the time I reached his house, the lights were on, flickering faintly. I could hear the hum of something mechanical from the garage. I crept around back, heart hammering in my ears. Through the small basement window, I saw Eric pounding on the inside of a wooden door, his face white with terror. And then Tom appeared behind him. Calm, tool in hand. "Time to learn some respect, son." I didn't wait. I grabbed the nearest rock and smashed the window, screaming Eric's name. Glass shattered, spraying my face. Tom spun toward me. his expression contorting. Finally, the mask gone. No charm, no calm, just raw, unfiltered rage. "Get out!" he hissed. Eric stumbled backward. I reached through the broken frame, yanking him toward me. The jagged glass tore into my arms, but I didn't care. He crawled through, gasping, and we ran, barefoot, bleeding, wild with adrenaline. Neighbors heard the commotion and called 911. When the cops arrived, Tom was standing in the driveway, beer in hand, cool as ever. "Boys were just horsing around," he said, smiling. "Got a little carried away." But Eric had the notebook. He handed it to the officers, his hands shaking. "This is what he's been doing," he said. The investigation tore the town apart. The notebook, the accidents, the receipts for electrical parts, it all came together. They found phone searches, missing safety locks from ladders, spare wiring tucked in his shed. Tom Palmer was arrested for 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted. The trial was brutal. Neighbors lined up to defend him. "He coached my son. He fixed our roof. He was like family. But evidence doesn't care about reputation," Eric testified, voice trembling but steady. He told the court how his father had studied his family like they were blueprints, how he'd mapped out their deaths with the precision of an engineer. The jury deliberated just over 3 hours. Guilty, life without parole. A month later, I visited Eric in Columbus. He'd moved in with his aunt. He looked thinner, older, like a man who hadn't slept in months. "You saved me," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, man. You saved yourself. You found the notebook." He stared down at his hands. "If you hadn't come that night, I'd be dead." We sat there in silence for a long time. Then he looked up, eyes wet, voice trembling. "You know what scares me the most?" he asked. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm like him, if I'll ever turn into him." I gripped his shoulder hard. "You're not him. You fought him. That's the difference." He didn't answer, just turned to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Tom Palmer still sits in Belmont Correctional Facility as I tell this. Word is, he's a model prisoner, helps fix wiring, tutors other inmates in carpentry. Polite, respectful. But I'll never forget that night in the basement, the look on his face when the mask finally slipped. He wasn't a father, not a neighbor, not even a man. He was a predator, patient, calculated, evil in work boots. And sometimes late at night I wonder how many more notebooks are still out there. I never really thought much about moving back home. Honestly, I swore I never would. But life doesn't care about your promises when it decides to knock you flat. I was 27, fresh out of a breakup that gutted me, and the rent on my cramped apartment in Richmond was bleeding me dry. So when Mom called saying she needed help around the house, I told myself it was temporary, just a few months until I got back on my feet. The house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac just outside Raleigh. White vinyl siding, trimmed hedges, the kind of neighborhood where every mailbox looked cloned. It should have felt familiar, comforting even. But stepping inside after all those years, something about it prickled at me, like static under my skin. Part of it was him. Richard wasn't my biological father, but he might as well have been. He married Mom when I was 8, and back then I was so desperate for a dad that I ignored the strange currents in the way he existed. The way he'd hug you a little too long, the way his smile always stopped just short of his eyes, the way his moods turned on a dime. 1 minute cracking lame jokes about the weather, the next, his jaw clenching like a storm brewing. By 15, I dreaded coming home. So, moving back at 27, I told myself he'd mellowed. People change, right? Besides, Mom needed me. Her arthritis had been getting worse, and Richard was never the helpful type. The first night he opened the door wearing that same unnerving smile. "Well, look who finally decided to come home," he said, voice smooth as honey, but with something serrated beneath it. His hand came down on my shoulder, too hard, too familiar. We kept your room just the way you left it." Mom bustled in behind him, wringing her hands. "We're glad you're here, honey. It'll be nice having family in the house again." I forced a smile. "Yeah, good to be here." But it didn't feel good, not even close. The first week passed fine, normal even. I picked up groceries, drove Mom to appointments, helped her around the house. I tried not to notice how Richard would sometimes just watch me. Not like a father watching his kid, but like someone waiting for you to slip, to confirm whatever theory he had about you. One night, we sat down to dinner. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, peas. Classic comfort food. Mom was chatting about her friend Donna's new hip replacement when Richard cut in, sharp and sudden. "You're chewing too loud." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Sorry." "Don't apologize," he said, eyes narrowing. "Just fix it. Drives me insane hearing you smack like that." Mom sighed. "Rich, stop. He's not doing anything wrong." He turned to her, voice low and controlled. "Don't tell me what I hear." The silence after that was suffocating. I swallowed the rest of my food in tiny, careful bites, the clink of my fork against the plate sounding like a gunshot in that dead quiet room. Later, Mom knocked softly on my door. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "You know how he is." "Yeah," I muttered. "I know." That was the problem. It wasn't just the little criticisms. It was everything else. The late-night footsteps outside my door. The way things in my room would be slightly moved when I woke up. The locks on all the interior doors stripped years ago so you couldn't shut them out. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the soft creak of the floorboard right outside my room. My heart jumped into my throat. The handle turned, slowly, deliberately. I sat up, pulse hammering. "Hello?" My voice cracked. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. In the morning, over coffee, I asked, "Were you in my room last night?" Richard chuckled without looking up. "Why? You hiding something in there?" Mom looked up from her mug, uneasy. "Rich, stop." He smirked, eyes fixed on me. "Just checking in on you, kiddo. You never know what kind of trouble you can get into in your sleep." By the second month, I'd started keeping notes, timestamps in my phone, little records of every sound, every comment, every instance where he seemed to know where I'd been even when I hadn't told him. Just proof, I guess. Proof that it wasn't all in my head. One night, I came home later than usual after grabbing a few beers with an old friend. The house was dark, except for the pale blue flicker of the TV casting shadows across the living room. Richard sat there in his recliner, motionless, like he'd been waiting for me. "Where you been?" he asked, voice casual, but his jaw was locked tight. "Out," I said, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. The clink echoed too loud in the quiet room. "With who?" "Just a friend." His tone sharpened. "Guy or girl?" I let out a long breath. "Why does it matter?" He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes glinting with something dark. "Because you live under my roof. What you do reflects on this family." My hands curled into fists. "I'm 27, not 17. You don't get to control me." His smile spread slowly, and the chill that came with it made my stomach twist. "That's where you're wrong." The turning point came on a Saturday. Mom had gone to stay overnight at Donna's, leaving me alone with him for the first time. The air in the house felt heavier without her there, quiet, but watchful. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich, trying to focus on the sound of the knife scraping across the bread instead of the way I could feel his eyes on me. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You think you're grown?" he said suddenly. I didn't look up. "I am grown." He took a step closer. "You think you can walk in here, act like a man, and disrespect me?" I set the knife down carefully, my pulse thudding in my throat. "I'm not disrespecting you." His hand shot out, slamming the counter beside me with a crack that made me flinch back. His face was inches from mine, eyes wild. "You don't get it," he hissed. "Everything in this house is mine. Your mother, this food, the air you're breathing right now, mine. You're here because I allow it." I stared at him, chest tight. "You're sick." For a heartbeat, his face contorted. Pure rage, animal and raw. Then it vanished, replaced by that eerie, empty smile. "Careful," he said softly. "You wouldn't want your mom to hear you talking like that." That night, I barricaded my door with a chair and sat on the edge of my bed, shaking until morning. After that, it only got worse. Notes began showing up under my door, block letters scrawled in thick black ink. "Don't forget whose house this is." My phone vanished one night, only to reappear in my drawer the next morning, battery drained to 0. My laptop password stopped working altogether. When I confronted him, he just smirked, tapping his temple. "Maybe you should write your passwords down somewhere, champ." The final straw came in early December. Mom was asleep, and I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something strange in the mirror. Just a faint red glimmer in the bathroom vent above the sink. I leaned closer. A tiny light. A camera. My stomach dropped. My skin went cold. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told Mom everything. She wanted to believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but fear kept her tethered. "Rich wouldn't do that," she whispered, her voice trembling. I climbed on the counter and showed her the vent. When she saw the light, she broke down crying. We made a plan. She'd go stay with Donna for a while. I'd pack my things quietly, leave while Richard was at work. But Richard never left the house that day. I was in my room, half packing, when the door burst open so hard it hit the wall. He stood there, chest heaving, eyes bloodshot. "Going somewhere?" he asked. I froze. "Just taking some stuff to storage." His gaze dropped to the suitcase, then back to me. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him with a soft click. "You think you can run?" "Richard, shut up," I said, backing away. His voice exploded, shaking the walls. "You think you can turn her against me? My house, my rules. You don't leave until I say so." He started toward me, and for the first time in my life, I truly thought he might kill me. Adrenaline kicked in. I shoved past him with everything I had, felt his hand graze my arm as I sprinted down the stairs and out the front door barefoot. The cold pavement bit into my feet as I screamed for help, pounding on the nearest neighbor's door. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Behind me, Richard stood in the doorway, smiling that same smile. "Just a family argument," he called out, his tone syrupy and calm. "Nothing to see here." But when the cops arrived, I had proof. Everything I'd been saving for months. The camera, the notes, the recordings on the hidden drive. They arrested him that night, charged him with unlawful surveillance, harassment, and a handful of other things I didn't even know how to process. It's been a year now. Mom and I live in a small apartment across town. She's in therapy. So am I. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night convinced I hear footsteps outside my door. Sometimes I swear I still feel his eyes on me. But then I remind myself, he's behind bars. For now. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post something like this online, but it's been sitting in my chest for years like a weight I can't shake off. Some nights when I can't sleep, I replay everything. Every word, every glance, every small moment I brushed aside because I didn't want to believe what they meant. My mind always drifts back to that house I grew up in, just outside Dayton, Ohio, and to the man who raised me, my dad. To anyone else, he looked like the definition of an honest blue-collar man. Steel-toed boots, oil-stained jeans, calloused hands, and that faint smell of motor grease and cigarette smoke that clung to him like a second skin. His hair was cropped so close you could see the pale scars etched into his scalp. People called him a hard worker, reliable, the kind of man who deserved respect. No one questioned the father who worked 12-hour shifts, And then there was the guilt. Always the guilt. "I worked my ass off to raise you," he'd growl over the phone. "And this is how you treat me?" Those words dug deep. I'd hang up and feel sick for hours. It was around that time I met Trevor. He was quiet, kind, the kind of man who noticed when I was cold and offered his jacket without a word. A mechanic, too, like my dad. But that's where the similarity ended. Trevor smiled with his whole face. He listened. When Dad found out, he lost it. One night he showed up unannounced, pounding on my door. I cracked it open, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. Beer and motor oil, thick enough to taste. "Who the hell is this punk?" he spat, eyes wild. "Think he's better than me? Think he can take care of you? You're blind if you don't see what he really wants." His voice filled the hallway, raw and venomous, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. But I should have been afraid, because that was only the beginning. "Dad, stop," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my chest was tight. Trevor was in the kitchen pretending not to listen, hands stilling over the sink. "You think I don't know?" Dad's voice was sharp, trembling with fury. "I see the way he looks at you. He's using you, just like your mother used me." "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Just go home." His nostrils flared. He stared past me toward the kitchen, eyes burning. Then he pointed at Trevor and muttered, low and cold, "You watch your back." He slammed the door behind him, and the sound echoed through the apartment long after he was gone. A week later, Trevor's car was keyed in the parking lot outside my building. Thick, deliberate gouges carved along the driver's side. The next night, his tires were slashed. No one saw who did it. But I knew. God, I knew. That was when I tried to cut him off completely. I blocked his number, stopped answering the door when he came around, pretended I wasn't home when he pounded on it for minutes at a time. But he didn't stop. He started leaving notes under my windshield wiper. "You can't ignore me. We're family. Blood doesn't lie." Once, there was an envelope instead. Inside was a photo, me and Trevor walking down Main Street, sunlight on our backs. It had been taken from behind a row of parked cars. My stomach dropped when I saw the writing on the back, jagged and familiar. "He won't protect you like I can." I took that photo to the police, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold it steady. The officer behind the counter looked at me with the polite, practiced sympathy of someone who's already decided what box to check. "Sounds like he's just upset," one of them said. "Keep your distance. Call us if it escalates." If it escalates. It did. One night after work, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. I froze, my keys half turned in the lock. For a moment, I told myself I'd just been tired that morning, that I must have forgotten to latch it. But my gut said otherwise. The air inside felt different, thick and still, like the room was holding its breath. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. I pushed the door open. The light from the hallway spilled across the carpet, and that's when I saw him. My dad was sitting on the couch, boots on my rug, hands folded neatly in his lap. His expression calm, too calm, like he'd been waiting. "Dad," I whispered, my throat dry. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk," he said, voice even. "You don't answer my calls anymore. You don't come by. You think you can just erase me." "You broke into my place," I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice shook. "I still have a key," he said simply. "Doesn't matter if you change the lock. I always find a way." Those words made my stomach twist into knots. I began inching toward the door, heart hammering in my ears. "You've been poisoned against me," he continued, his tone rising, his calm unraveling. "That boy, your mother, all of them, they don't know the real you. But I do." "Dad," I said quietly, "you need to leave. Now." He smiled. It wasn't his usual smirk or drunken grin. It was something else. Slow, deliberate, wrong. "No, kid. he murmured. "You're coming with me." Before I could react, he lunged. What happened next comes to me in flashes. The sound of furniture crashing, the sharp crack when his fist connected with my cheek, the taste of blood, my own scream echoing in the small apartment. I remember scrambling for my phone, shouting Trevor's name, then the sirens. Trevor had been waiting in the parking lot to pick me up. He heard the struggle, the thuds, my screams. He called 911 before he even reached the door. When the police burst in, Dad had me pinned to the floor, his hand locked around my throat, squeezing, his face twisted with something feral. They dragged him off me, cuffed him as he shouted over and over, "You're making a mistake. I'm the only one who loves you. I'm the only one who's real." The neighbors watched from their windows as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. Some whispered to each other, others just stared. He spent a few months in jail. Breaking and entering, assault, a list of charges long enough to fill a page. But in a town like ours, with a name like his, he got out faster than anyone expected. I moved out of state after that. New job, new number, new life. I thought distance would be enough. But sometimes when I'm walking home at night, I still feel it. The prickling at the back of my neck. That heavy, crawling sense that someone's watching. A man standing too long on a corner. A pickup truck idling with its lights off. A shadow lingering just beyond the glow of my window. And sometimes, when everything is still and I'm alone with my thoughts, I swear I can hear his voice. Soft and patient. Like he's standing right behind me. "You can't erase me." I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell a story like this. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, my life was about as ordinary as it gets. Friday night football games, corner diners that smelled like fried onions, and neighbors who knew your business before you did. My dad, Richard Calloway, was the kind of man people respected from the outside. A corrections officer at the state prison 20 minutes down the road, broad shoulders, iron handshake, that deep, commanding voice that could hush a room. To most people, he was steady, reliable, a family man. Inside our house, though, it wasn't that clean cut. Mom always walked on eggshells around him. I learned to do the same. If he came home with his jaw clenched, you kept quiet. If he sat in his recliner and cracked open a beer, you didn't interrupt him unless you were ready for trouble. Trouble didn't usually come in bruises, at least not often, but in words sharp enough to make you bleed inside. He had a way of shrinking you down, of twisting every mistake into proof that you were nothing but a disappointment. By 16, I'd started realizing something was wrong, not just strict dad wrong, dark wrong. It was a cold October night when things started unraveling. I had just finished my shift at Whitestone Diner, a little hole in the wall off Route 43 where the coffee tasted like burnt dirt and the jukebox still held songs nobody played anymore. I spent evenings bussing tables, sometimes manning the counter when it got busy. That night, the air smelled like rain and decaying leaves. My hoodie wasn't nearly warm enough. When I pushed through the back door after clocking out, I noticed Dad's truck parked near the edge of the lot. Old black Chevy, headlights off, engine rumbling low. My first thought was that he'd come to pick me up, but something about the way it idled there in the dark made my stomach twist. I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. He didn't say hi, didn't ask how my shift went, just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the wheel so tight the tendons stood out. "You know who was in there tonight?" he asked finally, his voice low and calm in a way that wasn't really calm at all. I shrugged. Half the town, same as usual." "Don't play smart with me, kid." His jaw flexed. "I saw you talking to that boy, the one with the leather jacket. What's his name?" "Tyler," I said carefully. "He's just a guy from school, came in for pie." "Pie, huh?" he muttered, his mouth curling. "Looked like more than pie to me." I rolled my eyes before I could stop myself. "Jesus, Dad, he was just ordering food." His hand shot out fast, gripping my chin so hard my teeth clacked together. He turned my face toward him, eyes glinting in the dim light. "Don't you ever take that tone with me," he hissed. "You think I don't see things? I see everything. Understand?" I nodded quickly, throat dry, pulse hammering in my ears. He released me, started the truck, and pulled out of the lot. The ride home was silent except for the steady crunch of gravel under the tires, each sound like a gunshot in the dark. That was the start of the escalation. In the weeks that followed, Dad started appearing everywhere. Not just at the diner, but at school games, the grocery store, anywhere I might be. Even when I walked home from practice, I'd spot him off to the side of the road, arms crossed, watching. If I talked to anyone, especially a guy, he'd interrogate me later. One night I came downstairs to get a glass of water and found him standing in the living room with the curtains cracked open, binoculars pressed to his face. "Who are you watching?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even teasing. He turned slowly toward me, lowering the binoculars. A smile spread across his face, wide, patient, wrong. "You," he said. "Just making sure no one's sneaking around where they shouldn't," Dad said, lowering the binoculars with that crooked smile. By November, Mom had had enough. "You can't keep hounding him like this," she snapped one night after dinner. "He's a teenager, not an inmate. This isn't your prison job." Dad's fist slammed down on the table so hard the plates rattled. "You think I don't know what goes on out there? You think I don't know what boys are after?" His eyes flicked toward me, sharp and burning. "You don't understand what men are capable of." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Mom didn't argue again after that. She didn't have to. The fear in her eyes said everything. Things hit a breaking point the week before Thanksgiving. A friend invited me to a party at her family's barn. Nothing wild, just some music, kids hanging out, maybe a bonfire. I told Dad I was working late so he wouldn't lose it. For a while, it actually felt good. I laughed, I danced, I felt normal. Then I stepped outside for air, and my stomach turned to ice. His truck was there, parked at the edge of the field, headlights glowing faintly like the eyes of some waiting predator. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. "You lied." My blood ran cold. I stumbled back inside, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. 10 minutes later, the barn door creaked open. And there he was. "Dad." The word barely left my mouth. His presence sucked the air out of the room. The laughter died instantly. Whispers spread like a chill wind. "Son," he called, voice booming across the silence. "Time to go." I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. Tyler, the guy from before, stepped forward like he might intervene, but I caught his eye and shook my head. "Don't. Please." Dad's hand clamped around my arm, iron and heat. He dragged me outside, ignoring the stairs, ignoring my protests. The drive home blurred into headlights and fury. His knuckles were white on the wheel, his breathing shallow and ragged. "You think you can lie to me? Sneak around like some little—" The rest of the word burned out of him, shaking with rage. "Dad, I—" The slap came fast and hard, the crack echoing through the truck. My head snapped sideways. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. My cheek burned, but it was the look in his eyes that scared me most. Cold, wild, unfamiliar. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just strict. He was dangerous. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboard sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt like him watching. I started keeping a baseball bat under my bed. A week later, the real nightmare came. It was a Sunday evening. Mom had gone to stay with her sister after another fight, leaving just me and Dad. I was upstairs pretending to do homework when I heard it. The front door opening, then closing softly. Too softly. I crept down the hallway, my pulse drumming in my ears, and peeked through the railing. Dad was in the living room, but he wasn't alone. A man stood beside him, skinny, twitchy, eyes darting everywhere. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dad clapped him on the shoulder, grinning like they were old friends. "This is him," Dad said. My boy needs to learn how the world works. The stranger's grin widened, showing yellowed teeth. Yeah, he rasped. I can help with that. Ice slid down my spine. I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted back to my room, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't know what they were planning, but I knew I had to get out. I shoved open the window, climbed onto the roof, and dropped to the ground. Pain shot up my ankle when I landed, but I kept running. Down the street, barefoot, breath ragged, until I reached the Ellis's house. I pounded on the door until Mrs. Ellis opened it. Her eyes widened at the sight of me, shaking and gasping for air. When I told her what was happening, the color drained from her face. She called the cops without a word. They arrived fast. Red and blue lights flashing through the trees, sirens slicing the night. They found Dad and the stranger in the living room. Beer bottles scattered across the table, hunting knives lined up in a neat, deliberate row. Dad didn't resist when they cuffed him. He just watched me from the porch with that same calm, unsettling smile. "You'll thank me one day," he said, like he believed it. The stranger, his name was Carl Jenkins, had a record a mile long. Assault, breaking and entering, things worse than I can bring myself to say. Dad was charged with conspiracy and child endangerment. The police said he'd been planning tests to toughen me up, using Carl as part of his twisted lesson. It's been 3 years since that night, but I still wake up drenched in sweat, heart hammering. That smile burned into my mind. People in town don't talk about it much anymore, but I know what they're thinking. How could we not have seen it? How could a father do that? I don't have answers. I just know that behind closed doors, people can hide things you'd never believe. And sometimes the scariest monsters aren't strangers at all. They're the ones who raised you. I never thought much about hunting. To me, it always felt like one of those traditions that belonged to other families. The kind with framed photos of deer heads on wood-paneled walls, fathers and sons bonding over blood and gunpowder. Not mine. But in my family, hunting wasn't a choice. If Dad said we were going, then we were going. No questions, no arguments, no excuses. That Saturday started earlier than I wanted. I barely slept the night before, twisting in the sheets while the red glow of my alarm clock blinked like a threat in the dark. When it finally blared at 4:30 a.m., I wanted to smash it against the wall. Instead, I forced myself out of bed because I knew Dad would already be downstairs, waiting with that look, the one that said I was late for my own funeral. I dressed in silence. A faded camouflage t-shirt, an old pair of khakis that used to be my brother's, and some beat-up boots. Not real hunting boots, just stiff, scuffed yard shoes that still smelled faintly of gasoline and damp soil from the garage. As I knelt to tighten the laces, a sudden impulse hit me. I picked up my phone and started typing a text to my brother, just to ask if it was okay I wore his old clothes. Halfway through, my fingers froze. My chest tightened. He wasn't going to respond. He couldn't. The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the bed with a dull thud. I took a breath, long and shaky, and shoved the thought back where it belonged. When I stepped into the kitchen, Dad was already there, leaning against the counter like a soldier between battles. Camouflage jacket, utility vest, those ridiculous yellow shooting glasses he bought off late-night TV. On the table beside him sat what he called his hunter starter pack: 2 Snickers bars, a gallon of water, a half-gallon of milk, 2 protein bars, and a fistful of Slim Jims. "You ready?" he asked, voice gravelly, a bulge of tobacco tucked in his cheek. I nodded because anything else would have been the wrong answer. We headed out to his old pickup, the one that rattled like it was held together by stubbornness and rust. The cab smelled of gun oil, sweat, and stale coffee. I didn't know where we were going. Dad never said. He wasn't big on details. His favorite line was always, "Don't worry about it, just follow my lead." That was his entire parenting style in one sentence. The sky was bleeding from black to violet to red as the sun began its crawl up from the horizon. The world outside looked painted, too still, too quiet. My stomach twisted. Maybe it was lack of sleep. Maybe it was because I already knew this trip wasn't really about deer. "Listen," Dad said suddenly, spitting into a paper cup he kept wedged in the cup holder. "We just need to get one thing clear today." "What's that?" I asked. "When the shot's there, you don't hesitate." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Yeah, sure." That was the thing about Dad. He never explained, just commanded. When my brother was alive, he was the golden boy. People bragged about his perfect aim, his patience, how he could wait in the mud for hours for the right moment. Me? I'd rather stay inside, watch horror movies with Mom, eat microwaved popcorn, laugh about fake monsters instead of the real ones. But after Mom and my brother were gone, everything changed. The house turned into a mausoleum, silent, cold, and packed with ghosts that didn't make a sound. Dad filled the silence with anger, pacing rooms like a ticking bomb. As we drove, I noticed the landscape shifting. We weren't heading toward the woods. Instead of the road that wound into the hills, he took an exit that led toward a small town I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Mom had taken me there once to see an indie comedy at a little brick theater, the kind of place with wobbly seats and popcorn that came in paper bags. We'd laughed until our shoulders touched. Dad hated that place. Called it a yuppie nest. Are we getting supplies or something?" I asked, watching the exit signs blur past. "Nope," he said simply, spitting again into the cup. A few minutes later, we pulled into a gravel parking lot beside an empty hiking trail. The truck idled for a moment, the engine grumbling like it didn't want to be there either. Dad killed the ignition, and the sudden silence rang louder than the motor ever had. Through the trees, I could see the backs of huge houses with decks that looked like stages and swimming pools glowing faintly blue beneath the dawn. This didn't look like hunting grounds, not even close. Dad got out first, moving with purpose. He went to the bed of the truck and pulled out his rifle. I stayed inside, hands gripping my knees, waiting for... What? Instructions? Orders? Maybe for him to change his mind. He knocked on my window. "Let's go." I opened the door and followed, my boots sinking into the soft earth. Every step felt heavier than the last. "You like how quiet the house is now?" Dad asked as we walked, the crunch of twigs beneath his boots punctuating each word. "What?" "You're an indoor kid," he said. "Never cared much for noise. Must be nice now, huh? No nagging, no arguments, just quiet." I hesitated, watching his back move through the trees. "I don't like the quiet." He laughed once, a dry, humorless sound. "Yeah, well, we didn't choose our quiet. It got forced on us." He shoved another wad of tobacco into his lip and spat into the dirt. "You know what it's like to live in a house that's empty because of another man's decision?" I didn't answer. My chest tightened, the memory flashing uninvited. The phone call, the hospital's sterile light, the doctor's voice steady and rehearsed. The look on Dad's face when the words didn't make it landed. We walked until Dad suddenly stopped, crouching behind a thick patch of brush. He pointed ahead. "That one there, 317. See it?" I squinted through the leaves. The mailbox numbers came into focus. 317. The house beyond it was enormous. Walls of glass, marble statues standing like sentries in the yard. A wraparound deck that overlooked a waterfall pool. Even this early, the place wasn't asleep. A woman and a small boy, maybe 4 or 5, were playing by the water. The boy held a remote control, steering a little plastic boat in lazy circles. The woman knelt beside him, smiling so wide her whole face seemed lit from inside. She laughed every time the boat bumped the pool wall, reaching out to rub his shoulder. Dad dropped to his stomach in the mud, sliding the rifle's scope into place. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the focus. "You know about diseases, right?" he whispered. "What?" "Crazy shit. Stuff with names you can't even spell. You sleep with the wrong girl, wake up with something eating you alive, you know that?" I blinked at him, then at the boy splashing by the pool. "Yeah, I guess." "Pain's the same way," Dad said, pressing his cheek against the rifle. "It spreads, Transfers. Someone gives it to you and you pass it along. But it's not innocent. My stomach nodded. I'd heard this tone before, right after the cops told us about the man who ran the red light. The one who walked away with a few bruises while Mom and my brother never came home. "Dad," I whispered, "where are the hunting grounds?" His jaw tightened. "Right there." He nodded toward the house. "That man who owns this place, he gave us pain. Now we're giving it back." The words hit like ice water down my spine. I looked again at the boy, the toy boat circling lazily in the pool. One piece clicked into another until the picture made me sick. "No," I said, shaking my head. "We need to go home." Dad cocked the rifle. "You know he left the hospital after 2 hours? 2 damn hours. Your mom and brother are lying cold in a morgue, and this bastard went home like nothing happened. That's the world we live in, no balance, no justice, unless we make it." He inhaled, long and steady, his finger brushing the trigger. My body moved before my mind could stop it. I dropped to the ground and shoved the barrel down into the mud. "Stop it, Dad." His head whipped toward me, eyes blazing. "Back the hell off." He kicked me hard, his boot slamming into my ribs. White pain tore through my chest. I crumpled into the mud, gasping like an animal struck in the gut. "Please," I wheezed, "don't do this." But he didn't hear me, or maybe he just didn't care. "This is for you, baby girl," he whispered to the rifle, voice trembling. He wasn't talking to me anymore. The shot cracked through the trees like thunder. My ears rang. I buried my face in the dirt, heart pounding so hard it shook the ground beneath me. When I finally looked up, the boy's toy boat was drifting, slowing to a stop. The water beneath it darkened, blooming red. The woman's scream cut through the morning air. Sharp, animal, endless. Dad lowered the rifle, his shoulders slumped. Then he cried. Not the stiff, soldier-like tears from the funeral. These were raw, broken sobs that made him look small, like a man carved open. He stood, wiped the mud from his jeans, and staggered back toward the truck without looking at me. I wanted to chase him, tackle him, scream until he heard what he'd done. But I couldn't move. Every breath stabbed. My ribs throbbed. My body refused to obey. The woman's cries carried through the trees, desperate, pleading. Not to me, not really. But they felt like they were. Like I was supposed to fix something that could never be fixed. I just sat there, bleeding on the inside, realizing my father had finally passed his disease on to me. When news of his arrest hit later, I wasn't surprised, not even a little. Mom's relatives tried to deny it, to twist the story, but I knew better. I'd been there, I'd seen it, and the silence at home after that, it didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt haunted. I always thought my childhood was normal. Messy, sure, but normal enough. Or at least that's what I told myself. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a modest 2-story house with blue siding that peeled in long curls whenever winter dragged too long. Mom worked double shifts at the hospital, often coming home with the smell of antiseptic on her scrubs and exhaustion in her eyes. That left Dad, Warren Kassler, in charge more than he ever should have been. When you're a kid, you don't have the words for things, you just absorb them. You don't think my dad's controlling, or my dad's anger is unstable. You just know that the sound of his boots on the porch means silence. You know that when he snaps his fingers, you move. And you learn over time that when his eyes glaze over like ice, you'd better make yourself small, invisible, gone. By the time I turned 23, I thought I'd finally escaped all that. I'd graduated college, landed a graphic design job in Cleveland, and rented my own apartment. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, beige carpet that never looked clean no matter how often I vacuumed, neighbors who slammed doors hard enough to shake the walls, but it was mine. My mom said she was proud of me. My dad just muttered, "Don't screw it up." I thought leaving home meant leaving him behind. But people like Warren Kassler don't stay gone. They find cracks to seep through. It started with a phone call. I was sitting on the couch with Biscuit, my rescue mutt snoring beside me. The apartment was dim except for the TV's flickering blue light. It was close to 11 when my phone lit up. Dad. I hesitated before answering. I always did. Yeah? I said finally. You forget where you come from? His voice was rough, gravelly, like he'd been smoking cigars again. I've just been busy with work, I said, keeping my tone even. Busy, he repeated, stretching the word out like it tasted bad. Too busy to call your old man? Too busy to show some respect? I swallowed, the familiar tightness already creeping up my chest. I'll call more, okay? How's Mom? There was a pause, long, heavy, and then a low, bitter chuckle. She's fine. But you sound different. Think you're better than me now, huh? With your little computer job. I glanced at Biscuit, who lifted his head and whined softly as if he could sense my unease. I never said that. You don't have to say it, he said quietly. I can hear it. Then his voice dropped lower, darker. You'll see. You'll come crawling back one day. The line went dead. I sat staring at the black TV screen, my reflection hovering faintly in the glass. My stomach knotted. Months without a word. And that was how he decided to reach out. Over the next few weeks, small things began to happen. Things I tried to tell myself were coincidences. One morning I found cigarette butts scattered near my apartment door. I don't smoke. Neither do my neighbors. Another night, Biscuit woke me around 3 a.m., barking furiously at the window. When I pulled the curtain aside, I caught what looked like a man's shadow leaning against the street lamp across the lot. By the time I blinked, it was gone. Then came the note. A single sheet of paper, tucked under my windshield wiper in the parking lot. Family sticks together. Don't forget who raised you. No signature, but it didn't need one. A week later, I drove back to Dayton to check on Mom. She looked more tired than usual, dark circles under her eyes, but she smiled when she opened the door. Sweetheart, I didn't know you were coming, she said, wrapping me in a hug that lingered a moment too long. Just wanted to visit, I told her, though my eyes drifted past her to the living room recliner. Empty. Dad came out of the kitchen with a beer dangling from his hand, the bottleneck glinting under the overhead light. Well, well, he said, grinning without warmth. Look who finally decided to grace us with his presence. I forced a smile. Hey, Dad. He studied me the way a butcher might inspect meat, slowly, piece by piece, like he was peeling me open with his eyes. You been eating good, huh? Look soft. City life will do that to you. I clenched my jaw. I'm fine. He stepped closer until I could smell the stale beer on his breath. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget who made you tough enough to survive out there. Mom reached out, her voice low and tired. Warren, please. He shrugged her off with a grunt. Boy needs reminding. The world will eat him alive if I don't keep him sharp. Something in me snapped then. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe years of swallowing my own fear. I met his eyes and didn't look away. I'm not a kid anymore. You don't get to control me. The room went still. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to fade. His smile disappeared, replaced by something thin and cold. You'll regret saying that, he muttered. Then he turned and walked out to the porch, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled against the wall. After that visit, things got worse. It started with the emails. Anonymous, from burner accounts, always just enough to make my stomach drop. Ungrateful kids end up dead in ditches. Biscuit won't protect you forever. Blood runs thicker than water, but it spills just the same. I blocked each address, but more kept appearing, like a hydra, new heads sprouting where I'd cut one off. Then came the scratches, deep grooves etched into my apartment door, carved into the wood like someone had taken a key and dragged it with deliberate fury. One word, liar. I showed the landlord. He squinted, shrugged. Probably teenagers messing around. But I knew better. One night, After staying late at the office, I walked toward my car in the garage. The place was nearly empty, just a handful of cars scattered beneath flickering fluorescent lights. My footsteps echoed across the concrete, rhythmic and lonely. Then I heard it. Boots. Heavy. Deliberate. I froze. The sound stopped too. My pulse hammered in my throat. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers brushing against the small can of pepper spray my coworker had given me. "Think you can run from family?" A voice hissed from somewhere behind me. I spun around, spray raised. But there was nothing. Just pillars, shadows, and the hum of the lights overhead. Then I saw it. A piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. My stomach dropped before I even reached for it. "You can't hide from your own blood." I jumped into my car and sped out of the garage, hands shaking so hard the wheel slipped beneath my palms. It all came to a head in April. I'd fallen asleep on the couch after another sleepless night. Around 3 in the morning, Biscuit began growling low, his hackles raised. I sat up, groggy, every sense on edge. My laptop glowed faintly from the coffee table. A document was open, one I hadn't touched. Line after line scrolled down the screen, the same sentence repeating over and over. "A son who betrays his father deserves nothing." My stomach dropped like a stone. Someone had been in my apartment while I slept. I grabbed Biscuit and bolted for the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it, and called 911 with shaking hands. The cops found no sign of forced entry, but when I asked about the spare key I kept hidden under a fake rock outside, they just looked at each other. The rock was still there. The key wasn't. 2 days later, I drove Biscuit to my mom's house in Dayton for safety. She didn't ask questions, just held him close like she understood more than she said. Driving back alone down Route 35, I noticed a black pickup in my rearview mirror. It stayed there through every lane change, every exit, every turn. My chest tightened. I pressed harder on the gas. So did he. Then he swerved, clipped my bumper. My car fishtailed, tires screaming against the asphalt. I barely regained control before slamming into the guardrail. The truck roared past, and for a split second, I saw the driver's face. That square jaw, that smirk. Warren. This time, the cops listened. Traffic cameras caught his license plate. When they raided his motel room outside Dayton, what they found made my blood run cold. Walls covered in photos of me. Printouts, screenshots, shots taken from the street outside my apartment. Notes detailing my daily routine. What I ate. When I left for work. When I walked Biscuit. A shrine to his obsession with control. They arrested him on the spot. Charges, stalking, harassment, attempted vehicular assault. Mom called me crying. "I didn't know, sweetheart," she sobbed. "I swear I didn't know he was like this." I wanted to believe her. Warren took a plea deal, 3 years in prison plus a permanent restraining order. I spent the next year in therapy. Learned how to stop flinching every time I heard boots echo behind me. Learned that not every shadow outside my window meant danger. But some nights when the apartment goes still and Biscuit's breathing steadies at my feet, I swear I can still hear his voice. "You'll come crawling back one day." I don't know if it's a memory or a warning. What I do know is this: when kindness comes with conditions, when love feels like a leash, listen to the part of you that wants to run. Because sometimes the monster isn't a stranger. Sometimes it's your own dad. I used to think my dad's paranoia was just one of those harmless quirks, like how some people refuse to eat leftovers or double-check if the door's locked 5 times before bed. It was just dad being dad. But that summer weekend in 2021 proved me wrong. It wasn't just paranoia. It was something darker, something that had been festering for years right under our noses, waiting for the right moment to surface. My name's Rachel. I'm 27, a nurse at a small family clinic in Spokane, Washington. I've seen blood, bone, and panic more times than I can count. I've stitched up drunks who fell off bar stools, cleaned gravel out of road rash, and calmed screaming parents in the ER. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that weekend in the cabin near Kettle Falls, on the edge of Colville National Forest. It was supposed to be simple. 3 days of peace. Just me, my younger brother Tyler, Mom, and Dad. We hadn't taken a family trip in years, and Mom thought the change of scenery might reset us. God, she tried to sound hopeful when she said that. The truth was, we were all cracked in different ways. Tyler had dropped out of community college. Dad had been laid off from the mill. I'd been grinding through back-to-back shifts trying to chip away at my student loans. We were running on fumes, emotionally and financially. Dad was the one who found the Airbnb. Cheaper than a motel and cleaner too, he said, sliding his phone across the kitchen table. The listing looked decent. Tall windows, a big deck overlooking the pines, all wood and stone and mountain charm. But what stood out most was the converted garage. The owner had turned it into some kind of hobby space with long metal tables and bright overhead lights. Perfect for crafts or projects, the caption said. Tyler leaned in closer to the screen. Looks like an operating room, he muttered, half smiling. He wasn't wrong. There was something clinical about it, too sterile for a mountain cabin. We hit the road that Friday afternoon, the Ford Explorer packed to the roof with coolers and duffel bags. Mom sat up front beside Dad, chattering about fresh air and family time, while I rode in the back with Tyler. He had his earbuds in, eyes glued to his phone, the blue glow lighting up his face. "What are you watching?" I asked after a while, mostly just to fill the silence. He turned the screen toward me. A surgery video, someone's chest cracked open, metal clamps holding ribs apart. The sound of suction and faint mechanical beeping filled the car. I flinched. "Jesus, Ty, can't you watch something normal?" "Like what? Sports? Movies?" He didn't look away from the screen. "This is normal. You of all people should get that. You work with this stuff every day." "Yeah," I said. "But I don't sit around watching someone's sternum get split in half for fun." Dad grunted from the driver's seat. "Leave him be. At least he's not out doing drugs or getting into trouble." Mom sighed. "Don't start, Rick." The car fell into silence after that, just the low hum of tires on the highway and the occasional squeak of the wipers cutting through pine pollen. When we finally turned off the main road and wound up into the mountains, the air changed, sharper, cooler. The forest thickened around us, and sunlight filtered through the trees in trembling gold ribbons. By the time we pulled into the gravel driveway, the late afternoon light had turned soft and amber. The cabin really was beautiful, rustic but modern. Exposed beams, cedar siding, a wide wraparound deck. You could smell the pine sap and damp earth the moment you stepped out of the car. It was quiet, so quiet you could hear the wind whisper through the branches. But Tyler only had eyes for the garage. He pushed the door open like a kid unwrapping a present. Inside, the air was cool and faintly metallic. The overhead lights buzzed softly. He ran his fingers along one of the long stainless steel tables, his reflection warped in the brushed surface. "Feels professional," he murmured almost to himself. Mom gave a nervous laugh, rubbing her arms. "Well, as long as it's not for anything too professional." Dad chuckled, already unloading the cooler. I tried to shake off the unease crawling up my spine, telling myself it was just another one of those quirks, one more thing we'd all pretend not to notice. "Honey, it's just a hobby room, for crafts or fixing bikes or something else," Tyler said. His tone wasn't playful. He carried a duffel bag that clunked when it hit the corner, something solid inside. He didn't let anyone near it, not even Mom. We tried to act normal. Grilled burgers, played cards, laughed at Dad's awful puns. For a little while, it almost felt like the trip might actually work. Tyler even cracked a smile when Dad burned the burgers and Mom threatened to confiscate the grill tongs. But every so often, Tyler would slip away to the garage. "Checking for mice," he said when Mom asked where he kept disappearing to. Dad just muttered, "Kids lost it," under his breath. By 11, Mom and Dad decided to head into town. Something about a live band and cheap beer. "Small town charm, right?" Mom teased, kissing me on the cheek. "Come with us," she said. I shook my head. "Can't. I'm dead on my feet. 2 double shifts this week." Tyler rubbed his temples. "Headache," he murmured. They left, headlights fading down the long gravel drive until the night swallowed them. The cabin went quiet except for the crickets and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I stretched out on the couch scrolling my phone when I heard it, metal clinking, a soft whimper, muffled but real. Not a TV, not an animal outside. A chill crawled up my spine. I followed the sound to the garage. The door was locked. Through the small window, the harsh fluorescent light glared down on Tyler, bent over the table, wearing gloves and one of my surgical masks, the one from my nursing bag. His shoulders moved in tight, deliberate motions. "Tyler?" I knocked softly. "What are you doing?" He didn't hear me, or pretended not to. I pressed my face closer to the glass. That's when I saw it. A dog. A mutt with gray fur, chest rising and falling in shallow jerks, its body splayed open under the light. Blood glistened wet and black on the table. My stomach turned. I pounded the door. "Tyler, open this right now." A pause, then the slow creak of the lock sliding. The smell hit me first, iron and bleach, raw meat and chemical sting. Tyler stood there in a clear plastic apron, spattered with red. His eyes were wild, bright, almost feverish. Behind him, the dog's belly was open, ribs glinting under the light. "I fixed him," he whispered. "He had something wrong inside. I could tell when he walked." My voice cracked. You can't do this. Jesus, Tyler." I fumbled for my phone, my hands slick with sweat. The screen slipped once before I could even open it. He lunged faster than I thought possible, knocking it from my grip. His hand clamped around my wrist. Strong, unshakable. "You don't get it," he hissed. "I'm learning. I'm getting better." My gaze darted toward the duffel bag sitting open near the table. Inside, scalpels, clamps, surgical scissors, bottles of veterinary sedatives, diagrams printed from God knows where. My throat closed up. Then, crunch. Tires on gravel, headlights flaring through the window. Mom and Dad. Tyler froze, his grip loosening. I yanked free, heart hammering. "Clean this up," I whispered, trembling. "Clean it up before they see." He smiled faintly. Already planned on it. When they walked in, the garage looked spotless. Table gleaming, floor mopped, the air thick with bleach. Tyler sat at the kitchen table eating cereal, chatting with Dad about the band like nothing had happened. Mom ducked into the pantry for coffee, and in that tiny window of quiet, Tyler leaned closer to me. His voice was barely a breath. "I buried it," he said. "Behind the shed. Nobody will ever find it." My skin crawled. After breakfast, Dad clapped his hands together. Hike time. Family bonding like the old days. Tyler pressed a hand to his stomach. "Not feeling great. You guys go." Mom frowned but didn't argue. We left him there. Halfway up the trail, Mom exhaled shakily. "Maybe you're right. Maybe Tyler's just lost. He needs help." Dad's jaw tightened. "He needs discipline. That's what he needs." We got back around 1. Dad's car was gone. "Maybe he drove into town," Mom said, her voice too light, too forced. But when I noticed the garage door slightly ajar, that old cold feeling came rushing back. Inside, Tyler's laptop was open on the table, a video already playing. The screen flickered, grainy and gray. Tyler's face filled the frame. His voice was calm, too calm. "I've been practicing for months," he said. "People are just machines. You open them up, you can fix them. High school taught me that. Their bullying showed me what's broken. Now I can fix it." The footage shifted, static, and then the driveway came into view. Dad's car pulling in. Subject presented itself. Tyler narrated. Male, mid-50s, chronic back pain, intervention required. The screen went black. Mom screamed. We called the sheriff. Deputies arrived within the hour, combing the forest. They found Dad's Ford 8 miles out, the driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. 2 days later, they found him. Alive. Barely. He was in a shallow cave near an old mine, his back cut open, muscles exposed, surgical clamps still in place. Somehow Tyler had missed the major vessels. Dad survived, but he never walked the same again. As for Tyler, he was gone. His footprints led into the trees, but they ended at a creek. The deputies found his hard drives hidden in the garage. Dozens of videos. Animals first, then sketches, notes, lists of subjects, future ones. Mom couldn't watch. I did. Enough to know it hadn't been sudden. He'd been unraveling for years and we'd ignored it. We sold the house, moved south, changed our names, tried to pretend it never happened. But the sightings came. Once in Idaho, once in Oregon, always fleeting, always just out of reach. And sometimes, during long night shifts at the clinic, when the halls go quiet and the vents hum low, I swear I hear it again, that metallic clink of instruments, the ragged whimper of something alive on a table, and I wonder if Tyler's still out there, still practicing, still waiting for his next subject. I was 14 when the worst day of my life happened, and it didn't start with screaming or sirens or even the police. It started with my mom pounding on my bedroom door at 6:30 in the morning. Each knock was sharp, frantic, like she was holding herself together by a thread. "Sammy, get up. Now get dressed. We gotta go." Her voice cracked, raw and sleepless. I blinked against the dull morning light bleeding through my blinds. My back ached the way it always did since the fall last year, the fall everyone pretended was an accident. I rubbed my eyes. "Go where? School doesn't start till 8. "No school today," she said, breath trembling. "We're going to see your father." That got me sitting upright real fast. My name's Sam Harper. I'm the oldest of 3. Eli's 12. Quiet, sharp as a tack, always thinking before he speaks. The kind of kid who looks at the world like it's a puzzle he might solve if he just stares long enough. Then there's Lily, 7, a blur of sunlight and noise, living in some dream world only she understands. And then there's Dad, Jack Harper. To everyone in Millwood, Texas, he was the hardworking guy who ran the feed store, the one who'd give free seed to old farmers behind on their bills. But to us, he was complicated. When he was sober, he could be warm, even funny, reading Lily bedtime stories in a bad pirate accent, talking baseball stats with Eli, showing me how to change the oil on the old Chevy like it was some sacred ritual. But when the bottle came out, something darker came with it, something mean that lived behind his eyes. Last year, on my 13th birthday, that darkness showed itself. He pushed me down the stairs. Everyone still says it was an accident. Mom told the ER nurse I'd tripped while running, but I remember his hand, hot and hard on my shoulder, and the snap in my spine, that sound that didn't feel real until the pain hit. Then nothing, just black. Now I live with the hum of wheels beneath me, and I've never looked at my dad the same since. Mom didn't say much while we got ready. Her movements were clumsy, distracted. She kept whispering, "We need to leave. We need to go now." Her hands shook so badly she couldn't zip Lily's jacket, fumbling with the teeth of the zipper until Eli stepped in to help. By the time we piled into the SUV, rain had started to fall. Thin, nervous drops tapping the windshield. Eli was the first to speak. "Mom," he said quietly, "why are we going to the station? Did something happen to Dad?" Her knuckles went white around the steering wheel. He's being held," she managed. "Just don't ask me questions right now." Lily swung her legs, oblivious. "Daddy's in trouble," she sang softly. "No," Mom said too fast, too tight. Not exactly, just sit quiet, baby. Please." After that, the car went silent except for the slap of wipers and the low hum of tires over wet pavement. My heart thudded in my chest, steady and heavy, because I already knew what we weren't saying out loud. Dad had finally done something bad enough that no one could cover for him this time. The county jail in Millwood isn't much. 2 floors, a short hallway lined with cells. The air thick with disinfectant and something sour underneath. I'd been there once before, on a school field trip. It hadn't smelled like this then. Today it reeked of bleach, sweat, and fear. A deputy with tired eyes and coffee breath led us down the corridor. 10 minutes, he said flatly, and I'll be right here. No exceptions. Dad was in the last cell, alone. At first, I didn't even recognize him. His jeans were torn up like he'd been clawing at them. His black sweater was stiff with something dark, dried and crusted along the front. His skin looked wrong, pale, almost gray, drained of the color I remembered. His hair hung greasy over one eye. "Daddy!" Lily squealed, running to the bars, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. He didn't move, didn't even blink. He just sat there, hunched over on the narrow cot, his mouth slack, eyes fixed on the concrete floor. "Jack," Mom whispered. Her voice cracked around his name, fragile as glass. He didn't move, didn't even look up. "Dad," Eli said, stepping closer, fists clenched tight at his sides. "What did you do?" Nothing. No flicker of recognition. No sigh. No breath. That's when I realized what had been gnawing at me since we walked in. In that silent room, you could hear everything. Mom's shaky breaths, Lily's little sniffles, Eli's slow, measured inhales. You could even hear me trying to steady my own breathing. But not Dad. Not once. No inhale. No exhale. It was like he wasn't alive anymore. Just sitting there, hollowed out, staring into some private hell that none of us could see. When it became clear he wouldn't speak, the deputy guided us back upstairs. Mom stumbled, gripping her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her to the floor. Eli's face was carved from stone, unreadable. Lily hummed softly, skipping to keep up, pointing at posters on the wall, missing pets, neighborhood watch notices, bright colors that didn't belong in a place like this. The sheriff himself met us in the lobby. His uniform looked too crisp for his weary face. He didn't soften the words. Didn't even try. 6 days ago, he said, voice flat. A girl named Kelly Parker, 9 years old, went missing on her way to school. I remembered the flyers taped to stop signs, the search parties trudging through the woods with flashlights, the church bells that rang every evening at 6, praying she'd be found. Everyone had blamed a drifter, or thought maybe she got lost in the creek bed. But the sheriff's eyes told me that was wishful thinking. This morning, he continued, your father walked into the station carrying a garbage bag, dropped it on the floor. His jaw flexed. Inside, deputies found Kelly's upper half. The rest was found later in your basement freezer. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. A muffled sound, half gasp, half sob, escaped her. Lily blinked, confused, like she couldn't fit the words into her world. Eli's voice broke into the silence. No, that's not true. That can't be true. But I just sat there, because somewhere deep down, I already knew it was. I'd always known what he was capable of. The sheriff's voice was low, almost disgusted. Your father hasn't said a word. Not one damn word. But the evidence speaks for itself. After that, everything blurred. The drive home. The flash of camera bulbs outside the station. The reporters shouting our last name like it belonged to them. That night I heard Mom on the phone. I was in the hallway, the lights off, just listening to her voice tremble through the dark. There was a note, she whispered, pinned to the little girl's leg. I froze. Her voice cracked again. It was addressed to Sam. The sound in my ears went hollow, like the air itself had been sucked out. I pressed closer to the wall, listening. Melissa, I'm sorry for what happened last year, she read, her words shaking. Please forgive me. I got you some new legs, just your size. I know they're not exactly the same. Hers are less toned, but it's the best I could do. She just wandered into the woods while I was walking. I hadn't thought of what to get you for your birthday, but when I saw her, I knew they'd be perfect for you. Please understand. From Dad. I didn't move. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just sat there in my chair, the metal cold beneath my palms, my useless legs heavy on the footrests. My birthday was in 2 days. We drove home from the station in silence. Rain had stopped, but the sky still looked bruised. Lily leaned her forehead against the window, whispering nonsense to the passing trees. Eli stared down at his hands, jaw tight enough to tremble. Mom's "everything will be okay" smile was stretched too wide, her knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. I stared straight ahead, feeling nothing. Not shock, not grief, just a numb acceptance. Because the truth was, I wasn't surprised. Not really. Dad had always been violent, always cruel. The only thing that shocked me was how far he finally went. Neighbors whispered. Reporters camped outside. Mom packed boxes, muttering about leaving Millwood, about starting fresh somewhere else. But I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice crawl through my mind. Happy birthday, Melissa. These legs are for you. Sometimes when the house was quiet, too quiet, I swore I heard breathing behind me. The same breath he never took in that cell. And I couldn't help but wonder if something like that, something evil enough to hollow a man out, could really die in a locked room. Or if it just waited, patient, silent, inside us. Because blood is blood, and some stains never wash out.